Hi, Misha here, and I really haven't talked much at all about Chinese military aircraft yet. So tonight I thought I would. And this is what happens when you let China, when you give China a license. On the table, I have the Shenyang, or Shenyang, as some say, J-11B, the J-15, and finally the J-16. If these look very similar, there's a very good reason for that. They're all based on the Sukhoi SU-27 SK airframe, which China purchased the production line for and assembly rights all the way back in 1996. And from that, they've actually managed to make an entire family of fighters. This is not, of course, the only thing in Chinese Army Air Force and Chinese Navy Air Force Service, but these are major aircraft. The 11B is an upgrade of the original J-11, which was the name given to the Chinese production SU-27 SK. This is primarily an air superiority fighter. The 15 is a navalized version. Many say it's a Chinese copy of the SU-33. That is and isn't true. We'll get into that. But this is what China flies off its sole aircraft carrier at this time, which itself was once actually a Soviet frame. And then the J-16 is a modern strike fighter, Interceptor, with ground attack ability as well as air-to-air. And it is said to be based on the SU-30 MKK, which again is and isn't true. It's just as much based on the J-11BS, which was the two-seat version that can be traced all the way back to the SU-27 more than the SU-30 MKK. But yeah, of course, even in Russia, the Sukhoi family, 27, 30, 33, 34, 35, are actually all very similar. These are all 1/72 scale diecast models. They are all from Air Force 1. They have similar features. They do come with gear down only, but they have ordnance. They also have opening canopies, and some parts are moving. And these are actually quite heavy die-cast models with pretty much everything on these metal except for the missiles and part of the nose cone, I suppose. But even like the pilot tubes are metal on these, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I thought we'll just talk a bit about these and wonderful Chinese-Russian relations and China in the 21st century. These are all 4th generation, or at most 4.5 generation. For China's 5th generation fighter, they do have the J-20 and even perhaps the J-31 if that gets into production. But that said, these will be the backbone going forward, at least for several years. And so, pretty much the bread and butter for both the Navy and Army Air Forces. So let's get into it. Alright, got it off the stand. As I've said many of you times, the stands that Air Force One provides are great. They have the aircraft's info here. They're solid metal. They plug in with 2 holes. They even attach to themselves with a little wing nut. The only negative is they are very tall. So, something to keep in mind. But anywho, this is so heavy it's hard enough to turn. The original aircraft, like most Sukhois in the SU-27 family, is large. It's just a hair under 72 feet long, a wingspan of a little over 48 feet. 2 very powerful, very capable engines. Much like the Russian, it has a total of 10 hardpoints and carries a 30mm cannon with 150 rounds. And the original version here would be a single seat. And this was an air-superiority fighter. Well, this dates back to the 1990s. As I said, in February of 1996, an agreement was signed between Sukhoi and Russia, and really the Chinese government, we'll say Shenyang, for China to produce 200 SU-27 SK fighters under license. Russia would provide parts kits, essentially, and assembly, testing, and all that would be conducted in China. This meant that the aircraft would have Russian avionics, engines, radar, etc. In 1998, the program was underway. The J-11 name was selected and went into use. The first Chinese assembled plane flew in December of that year. And they would, continue the arrangement briefly. But in 2002 already, Shenyang thought they could do better. So they kind of cheekily revealed a mock-up of an improved version that would be built with Chinese components. And the government was claiming that by this time, the SU-27 SK was outdated. It was not keeping up with modern technology, 21st century. They particularly pointed to the radar and the avionics, the cockpit, flight instrumentation, some weapons compatibility, etc. So in 2003, Shenyang would stop assembling SU-27 SKs. These aircraft built from Russian parts would be known as the J-11A, and about 104, including the first ones, would be produced. And not wanting to lose the contract and everything, Sukhoi proposed they switch to the SU-27 SKM, a modernized version. They did have some of the updates that they were looking for, but it was quite clear that China was angling for their own domestic version. Which they would put into production as the J-11B. And these would first be delivered to the People's Liberation Army Air Force in 2006 for testing and evaluation. Now, the B is very similar to the A, certainly externally, but it had new Chinese engines, the WS-10, new Chinese avionics, radar, new weapons compatibility, and some other modern features. Most importantly, since all the components were built in China, Russia was cut out of the loop. So basically, they purchased the production line, got familiar, got Russia to train them, saw how to build the parts, and when they no longer needed them, they ended the agreement. At first, Russia did not pitch too much of a fit, 2004-2005 period, at least publicly. But later on, 2007-2010 timeframe, they started accusing China of unlicensed production, taking advantage of the agreement, saying that the agreement did not allow for what they were doing, yada yada yada. So that would strain relations between Russia and China, but not break them. Because there was some validity to China's claim, and there was some validity to Russia's claim. Nothing's ever quite cut and dry. And speaking of, just because the 11B was in production by 2006, it actually started off having a lot of issues, namely with the engines. They were not performing well, and they were really not getting the same service life as the Russian engines, like 1/10. This was traced back to manufacturing errors. They also had some trouble with other aspects, but yeah. One neat thing that China did do in its improvements, they started using more modern composite materials in the airframe, which actually made it both stronger and lighter weight, which is a good thing. This is a heavy aircraft as it is. And they would increase its still somewhat limited but available ground attack close support ability. These of course carried air-to-air missiles, but they could also carry rocket pods, iron bombs, and the like. Really by 2009, give or take though, the issues have been worked out and these started to really be fielded in numbers. And the first time these really were seen outside of China was in 2011 during military exercise training maneuvers held with Pakistan. Actually, China had tried to convince them to purchase, and succeeded at sometimes, some of their aircraft, so they took these to show the abilities. As of course is often the Chinese government in the beginning kind of denied the 11B, but finally admitted it and publicly supported it, promoted it, said it's as good or better than this, that, and the other. Doesn't matter. Beginning in 2007. So by 2011, 2012, they were pretty much showing these off. In 2014, on August 19th, the most historical event so far with the J-11B took place when one of these got a little too close to an American P-8 Poseidon anti-submarine aircraft and caused a crash, killing the J-11 pilot. America accused the Chinese pilot, and therefore China, of being negligent, flying way too close, not obeying military protocols, being aggressive, and just, flaunting. China, on their side, accused America of flying in or too close to their airspace and basically putting their nose in their business, and also being too aggressive. And again, both sides kind of have a point. To date, a little over 250 of these have been built, with some of the older 11As updated to the 11B standard. The major user is the Army Air Force. They have fielded over 200 11A, 11Bs, but the Navy, Air Force flies about 50 themselves. There was a version, two-seat version, known as the J-11BS, and also a navalized version, known as the J-11BH. That said, as far as I know, China is the only user of this aircraft. They haven't exported it to other militaries. And it seems like the hoopla with Russia has kind of died down, because China was right. This was becoming an older airframe in the early 21st century, and now 20 years later, while it's not useless, it's not brand new technology, to say the least. And it really just kicked off the other aircraft we have here. So let's move on to this feller. Alright, swapping these around. I realize I forgot a couple of little tidbits on the J-11B. NATO reporting name is Flanker L, so it's again within the Sukhoi group as far as NATO is concerned. Max altitude is registered at 62,000 feet. Like I said, it has 10 hard points, 1 cannon. Max speed with the Chinese engines is about 2.1 Mach. So, a little less, perhaps, than its Russian cousin. But you get the idea. The J-15 was a bit of a parallel project. In the late 90s and 2000s, China actually ended up purchasing a half-complete and half-rusted-out aircraft carrier from Ukraine. It was part of the Kuznetsov class with ski jump. And this would ultimately become China's first aircraft carrier. The Liaoning or something like that. I apologize. I know nothing about Chinese, and it's late and I'm tired. But you get the idea. They wanted to have a carrier, and to go with it, they needed an aircraft for it. So they were interested in a navalized version of the SU-27. And they did have talks in the early 2000s with Sukhoi and Russia about purchasing 24 SU-33s. But the deal never went through. Russia was a little ticked off about the J-11B deal, but really more than that, it was money. Sukhoi was not producing the SU-33 at this time. And so the price they quoted China felt was very high. They also said they would need a minimal order of 50 to make it worth their while to start the production line up again. And again, they were already a little salty over recent goings-on, so they weren't really in the mood to do China any favors. And China came back with this, saying, look, the SU-27SK is already becoming outdated. The SU-33 will become equally outdated. We really just want it as an interim measure to have something on board our carrier until newer, what we would refer to today as 5th generation aircraft are available. So they only wanted a few, and they didn't want to pay much for them. Can't blame them on that. So talks fell apart. So the program that will result in this aircraft here was started around 2006. So about the same time the 11B was going into production and testing, they would start making the navalized version. This was based on the J-11BH, and it was based on the SU-33, sort of, because along with a half-complete aircraft carrier, China purchased the T-10K3 prototype SU-33 from Ukraine. So they had an early variant to reverse engineer. So that's what they did. Worked on it. By 2009, the first model took a test flight. And then in 2010, they did simulated takeoff runs on land, kind of with a mock-up of a ski jump. And then in 2012, the first test pilots did carrier takeoff and landings. And with that, these were adopted and full rate production commenced at the end of 2013. I've seen the name Flying Shark applied to this. NATO calls it Flanker X2. And it was not without criticism. Also in 2013, a Chinese reporting group, news source, mocked it, calling it a flopping fish. So I love the image of flying shark, flopping fish. Hey, that could be like a sequel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Anyway, basically they said it didn't work in the sense that to take off from the carrier, it couldn't, if you filled it up all the way with fuel, you really couldn't carry much of any weapons. And if you carried a bunch of weapons, you couldn't fill it up, meaning the range was nothing. And now, for some militaries, they can just do aerial refueling, but at that time, the Chinese Navy did not have this ability, so it was taking off and using what fuel it had on board. The government came back saying, oh no, it can carry up to 24,000 pounds. It's good. They pointed out it's got 12 hard points, so it's like the newer Sukhois. It has the extra hard points. It still has the 30mm cannon. Same dimensions as the other one. It uses two of the same WS-10 engines. So they said, oh, it can carry a bunch of weapons. But then they finally admitted, well, when it's fully loaded, it can carry 4,000 pounds. Which, by World War II standards, is a lot. By 2020 standards, is not. So they kind of tacitly admitted that they had some problems. And part of it has to do with the carrier itself being so small comparatively, and what happens. Nevertheless, they would build these, and they would take their first cruise in 2016. And would kind of practice operations. And China's being realistic. They pretty much are doing this whole program with the J-15 as well as the carrier is more of a test than a full military action, just to get experience. But already by 2018 it was said they were probably going to pull these out of service pretty soon. There had been 4 crashes, some of which resulted in fatalities, other issues, and again, the whole fuel weight weapons thing never got resolved. By the way, this could carry, of course, air-to-air missiles. It could carry rockets, bombs. It could also carry subsonic and supersonic anti-ship missiles. So that's pretty neat. So already 2 years ago or so, the writing was on the wall. And again, this was always meant to be an interim solution. It's not really sure, at least as far as I know, what's going to definitely replace it. There are a few ideas. The J-20, maybe even a navalized version of the J-16. To date, only about 20 have been built, but then again, that's about the same as the SU-33. This is the single seat version. They do make a J-15 S 2-seater. As you see, it does have the canards, like the SU-33. And one reason I wanted this model, Hobbymaster makes one too, aside from this being a little cheaper. It has one other feature that the SU-33 has. The wings can fold up for storage on board a carrier deck, or hangar I should say. The Hobbymaster model, they do not do this. Plus I've already got a Hobbymaster model of the Russian, so I thought save a little money. And I do like the articulating wings. I think it adds a little something, makes it a little bit different. You can remove the ordnance if you want. They're kind of lightly tabbed in with glue, but you can remove them. Now the landing gear are pretty well fixed because they're all solid metal, but you can pop the ordnance off without really worrying about breaking much of anything. So you can put it in a few different configurations. On the other hand, you do get a stand that is pretty much superior to Hobbymaster's, and it's hard to say otherwise. Like one thing, I picked it up and it was a little bit loose. All I had to do was, tighten that wing nut. Now we're tight as can be. Plus, because it's got weight behind it, these don't tend to want to tip over. Looking on Wikipedia, the performance page seems a little off for this one. It says it can get up to Mach 2.4 and an altitude of 66,000 feet. Maybe, but that sounds more like propaganda. Again, fuel and all that and weight. This was always a big girl. And I don't know. Using the same engines. But take it as you will. Now, of course, we have a tail hook too. Because, of course we do. Naval. So that's the Flying Shark. The Flanker X. What about the final member of our family tonight? And now the J-16. Strike fighter, multirole fighter, Interceptor. Again, same dimensions as the rest. I think I know what Wikipedia did on the J-15. I think they copied the stats from this one because they look the same. And this one is reporting at Mach 2.4 on there. I've seen Mach 2.3 on other websites, but the point is it was a little faster. And it does have a higher altitude of about 65 to 66,000 feet maximum. And it too, because of being a newer design, has the 12 hard points. This is, of course, a two-seat design. This dates back to the early 21st century, like the others. At that time, China actually did purchase some Su-30 MKKs from Russia, even having kind of a variant of their own. And they did that to study the radar and targeting system, because the Su-30 was designed to give performance that the Su-27 could not when it came to air defense and interception and long range. So they purchased those, and they took their testy J-11 frame, specifically the BS frame that I mentioned earlier, and they integrated the elements that they liked from the Su-30, and they came up with the J-16. There's not a lot known or to be said about this. It's a relatively new aircraft. Much of the testing and whatnot took place in 2012. They were officially accepted into service in 2013, with units beginning to receive them in 2014. And to date, they've produced about 130 with production ongoing. This is said to be what will be the backbone of the Chinese Air Force going forward. They might go to 5th generation aircraft like the J-20 or J-31. Those would be analogous to like their F-22s. This is more like their F-16, kind of the more workaday. This is defined as a 4.5 generation, so it is said to have elements of newer aircraft, including its radar and targeting system. My favorite part about this design, though, is the paint. You know, Russia and America and others have spent billions of dollars and countless designs in trying to make a stealthy aircraft, right? China claims that they just painted this with a special radar absorbing paint, and it makes it both invisible to the eye and to radar. Right. Does it help? I'm sure it does. Having a radar absorbing paint couldn't hurt. But the basic Su-27 design, Su-30 design, is not stealthy. And this is not a stealthy plane. It might minimize the signature a bit, but their claims are boastful, to say the least. Oh well. This seems to be the one that they will just kind of rely on, and it is a capable and updatable aircraft, and it can use a wide range of weapons. It is very much a multi-role. It has very good air-to-air. It has very good ground attack, including using laser-guided and even satellite-guided air-to-surface munitions. Like the J-15, it can use anti-shipping missiles. Extra fuel tanks can be attached for longer range. And then finally, China is working on having an aerial refueling capability for their Navy. So there is talk that a navalized version of this might replace the 15. Who knows? But I've always thought the SU-30 design is pretty neat, and I have videos on the Russian progenitors of these, so if you're interested, check those out. Again, Hobbymaster makes a J-15, JC Wings makes a J-16, or at least an SU-30 MKK. And I'm sure someone makes a B-11, probably again Hobbymaster, since it's based on the 27. But I went with Air Force One, because they've actually done a wide range of Chinese jets, including the JH-7, J-8, and J-10, which has my favorite name of all time, Big Rust Dragon, and I will talk about those in another video. But these just seem like they could all go together because, yeah, you see the similarities. It's a copy. Yeah, they might have used what they consider better radar here and there, better munitions compatibility, but in reality, it's a copy of the Russian Sukhoi. An unlicensed one at that, according to Russia. But, yeah, these are what have been equipping the Chinese Air Force for 20 years, and probably will do so for a good while longer. And I think for the money, Air Force One, these are very heavy models. I'm even sort of kind of getting used to gear down. It used to really bug me. I'm starting to accept it some. For gear up, I still have the Hobbymasters, so it's alright. And I think the folding wings on this are pretty neat. I really wish Hobbymaster had to offer that on theirs. I just think it makes it look distinctive. But yeah, heavy duty, true diecast metal, heavy stand. These do not have pilot figures because they're older Air Force One, but your newer Air Force Ones typically do. I'm not saying they're the best brand ever. They definitely have their shortcomings. But they also don't charge Hobbymaster money. These are usually 40 to 50 bucks. So, not bad. But yeah, I just thought I would show some love for Chinese aircraft tonight. Why not? If you have any questions or comments, please do post them below. And if you could, like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.